5 then.
Okay.
Is that okay? Oh, you can see it.
Yes.
Top.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to Lee's parents.
Hello.
Well, thank you all so much for kicking off our Food and Faith Wednesday series after our seed starting. I'm so excited for you all to present. And again, I'm going to be quiet. So thank you.
Thank you. I need to figure out how to share this presentation.
Do you have a screen share button at the bottom? This little green thing? Okay.
Lee's helping me.
And you're gonna, exactly.
Okay.
You did it.
And then you'll want to hit present, which is, there's a shortcut. Oh, or that's good too.
Okay. Hello. So
If at any point Anna's not speaking loudly enough, just start screaming and encouraging them to
I
speak
have a very
louder.
small voice. So I'm Anna. I think you all know me. And Lee and I are going to be talking about sustainable food reflections tonight. And part of this will be us talking, and part of this will be more of a discussion about food and cooking and eating. So our idea is that everyone at least gets like one little party favor from tonight, just like one idea that you might like to think about. That's our only goal, is that we amuse you in one way. So, what is sustainability? As I started looking into what sustainability is for this presentation, the initial things I found were about the environment and being kind to the earth. But then as I was looking into it more, that was kind of woven together with being kind to other people and kind to animals, which you'll see in a minute that it's all kind of together. So if we start with being kind to the earth, there's a lot of different considerations you can look at with how to try to have your food be as sustainable as possible and not harmful to the earth. You can try to get food that's made locally or is seasonal. You can try to get food that doesn't have too much packaging so that packaging doesn't end up in a garbage dump. You can try not to waste food, or if there is food that gets wasted, it can be composted. You can try to get organic food so that pesticides don't harm the environment. The production of the food should create as few carbon emissions as possible. The food production should use minimal water. And even the way that you cook the food can be more or less sustainable depending on how much electricity you use. So there's a lot to think about. And then when we look to being kind to people, the workers who grow the food, harvest the food, process it, transport it, sell it, all of those workers should have safe working conditions and a living wage. And that's obviously a really complex series of considerations. And then being kind to animals, either you can try to have food that has animals being ethically treated, or you can try to get food from plants. So if right now you were going to ask me how to have a meal that does all of these things, we're going to have as an example a pizza. And I'm sure this is going to go great. I'm sure we'll be able to do all of this at once. So we've got this. We're going to start with being kind to the earth. We can do that. We're going to look at the first thing on the list, which is locally produced and seasonal. Okay, I feel confident about that. If you right now was asked me, how can I make this pizza locally produced and seasonal? I think there's farmers markets nearby that at the right time of the year, you can get a seasonal tomato and seasonal basil. I think you can get cheese from a farmer's market. I don't know if anyone makes flour in Arlington, but we can come back to that. This will be fine. This will be fun. Well, minimal packaging. I don't think I can get flour without any packaging. And zero wasted food, often when I have fresh produce, like sometimes some of it goes bad before I get to it, but that's fine. We can come back to those. This will go fine. It turns out there's more considerations. The tiny print is on purpose. That's to show how many considerations there are. You're not supposed to read this. This is the same list that was on the previous slide. So this is a lot to think about, and it's really hard to do all of this at once, right? So let's just go to the next thing. Let's just try to be fair to workers, right? I know that there are companies that make flour like King Arthur Flour and Bob's Red Mill that I think are employee owned. So I think at least some of those workers that are involved in that process of getting the food to us are being treated fairly. I don't know about the workers with the other ingredients, but we can figure that out later. Oh no. That is a lot of different kinds of workers to try to research. So then, okay, even if we can try to figure all these things out and figure out where to get all these ingredients that do all these things perfectly and don't hurt the environment and don't hurt any animals and all the workers are treated fairly, how much would that cost? And how long will it take me to get those ingredients? And how long will it take me to cook those ingredients? And like if someone has a food allergy or a dietary restriction, can I eat this? I lied before when I said that it was possible to do all of this at once. I think that right now with the way that our food systems are, it's really, really hard and maybe impossible to have everything we eat do all of these things all the time. So there's this quote that I really like. The perfect is the enemy of the good. And when I looked it up, some sources say that this is a quote by Voltaire. But the idea is that if you can do something good, it's better to do something good than to say like, I'm either going to do it perfectly or I'm not going to do anything. So for this idea, I picked a picture of really dirty carrots because sort of this idea of like, if you can get some food that is doing some of these things, that's good. And you can only do what you can do. But if you can make some choices that you feel good about, that is great. And I don't think it's possible for us to do this perfectly. So if it's not possible to do this perfectly, what are we going to talk about until this presentation is over? So Lee has some suggestions for some places to start to look for ways to try to do some good things.
So in 2019, you probably all remember that I had to eat an extremely intense diet. For everyone's remembering, yes. We all remember it was very traumatic for all of us. So I could only eat pastured meat. I could only eat wild-caught fish. I could only eat organic vegetables.
Only some organic
vegetables.
Not even all of them.
It was a tough time. And I had been vegetarian for 20 years. And so having to suddenly eat meat for medical reasons was very difficult for me. And a book that I read at the beginning of that year was called Growing Tomorrow, Behind the Scenes with 18 Extraordinary Sustainable Farmers Who Are Changing the Way We Eat. And basically a farmer from Smith Meadows Farm, which is right close to us, so close that they sell at the Courthouse Farmers Market on the weekends. A farmer named Forrest Pritchard visited 18 farms all across the United States that do all different things, mushrooms, fruit, pigs, and looked at how they ran small local operations. And reading this book got me, so I'm a very like social justice person. You'd probably think I'd be really into farmers markets, but I've always found them to be sort of like, you have to go to lots of tables and it's kind of, they're difficult. They're a little more difficult. When I read this book, I got really excited about farmers markets because it gives you a window into the ways that agriculture can be transformed with approaches that are more thoughtful, but also sometimes more difficult. And these are two farms that sell at the Courthouse Farmers Market that particularly have as part of their mission raising animals humanely, slaughtering them humanely, so that if you do have to eat meat, you can make sure it's done in the best possible way, and you can actually visit these farms and you can go see these animals. I think that's extremely important. If you've never been to the farmers market, you can find them at the website listed on the slide.
Thank you. So, since we've sort of covered that sustainability is a giant topic and you can only do what you're able to do, as I was looking into this, thinking about it, it seems food is so incredibly vital, and like, you have to eat. It is a requirement. You have to eat. So as I was looking into sort of how to make choices around food, I came across this thing called the hierarchy of food need. I don't know if anyone's heard of something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's this thing that, like, the most basic need is having like enough air and water, and then after that is feeling safe, and after that is having loved ones. Like, there's like a hierarchy of which needs are the most vital to be able to survive. And so that's kind of taking this idea and carrying it over to food. And the idea is that if someone is having trouble getting enough food, it is not only difficult, it's kind of impossible for someone to be making really detailed decisions about the food that they're eating. And this idea is not, this is not to say that if someone's experiencing hunger, they don't make good decisions in life. It's trying to say that whatever the barrier is to someone getting enough food, whether that's financial or medically, they're having trouble finding food that their body can tolerate, or emotionally, they're having trouble eating, like whatever the barrier is, it's like you have to get enough food. And if someone's expecting, like, oh, I should be making the perfect food choices, like Ellen Satter, who came up with this idea, and her hierarchy of food needs is more detailed than this. Her basic premise is that it's such a vital need to have enough food that you kind of need to take care of the more basic needs before you can be trying to do something more challenging. And that if you get enough food, you will just automatically, it'll get easier to make more detailed decisions about it, if that makes sense. And it's not an idea of like having a specific kind of diet or specific ideas about what someone else should be doing with their body or anything. It's just like someone having enough sort of mental space to make more decisions about it. You have to have enough food. And that's like, that's the baseline. So there are a lot of barriers to this. I think I skipped a slide. There's a lot of barriers to this. I may have skipped a slide. There's financial barriers, there's mental barriers, emotional, physical, medical. Some of these examples might be not having enough money for food. Mental barriers could be if you're having trouble figuring out how to make a meal out of the food you have on hand, or if you're having trouble figuring out how to make the food that you have work. Emotional could be if someone, for emotional reasons, is having trouble getting themselves to eat. Or it could be if you're experiencing some kind of disordered eating. Physical can be if it is like physically hard for you to cook, hard to get to the food. There's a lot of different barriers, and the basic premise is just like whatever the barrier is. Basically, if someone's expecting themselves to be eating whatever they think like the perfect food is, that's not a fair thing to expect of ourselves. So one of the barriers to food is financial, and this link that Lee found is a one-stop shop for food assistance. for anyone who lives in Arlington, and there's also a phone number for the same place. And later in the presentation, we'll be covering other organizations that also help with food assistance in the area. Okay, so on top of all these things, I have breaking news for everybody. There's a pandemic happening still, which I know is shocking to everybody. And recently, it was shocking to me when I went to the doctor.
James and Ron raised their hand.
Yeah, James and Ron did raise their hand.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On the pyramid, the food pyramid, I understand enough. You explained that very clearly. The next one would be enjoyable, which I get. And then instrumental, would that be trying to achieve the goals that we listed at the beginning about sustainability?
That's a really good question. I was thinking of it in that sense. Ellen Satter, the person who came up with this idea, was thinking of it in terms of trying to make really specific nutritional decisions. Like,
it's what I did in 2019. I was eating instrumentally, which took a ton of resources.
Yeah, it took like all of the time and energy.
Yeah, it was fine-tuned to your medical dietary need.
Yeah, so it's basically like trying to make really specific nutritional choices, and she's not saying that should be the goal for someone necessarily. She's just saying that like that's literally not possible unless you have enough food. Thank you for asking.
I was gonna say it's when you eat cellos. Okay. Go on.
Okay. So recently when I went to the doctor, I was feeling really sick, and I've been feeling sick for over a week. And when I went to the doctor, I discovered that I had a sinus infection and ear infections and a throat infection all at once. And it was all different infections. And so the doctor prescribed me a lot of pills. And doctor's visits are really weird right now, especially when it's a doctor's visit where they're asking to look down your throat when you've been wearing a mask in public for a year. It's very strange to go to a doctor right now. And I was so discombobulated by the entire experience that as she was talking to me about what might have caused this, she was saying like, well, it's possible that because your system was fighting one of these things, that your immune system like was busy and so these other things happened. And then she said, or are you experiencing any stress? And I did not know what to say because what I wanted to say was, there's a global pandemic. And I haven't seen my loved ones for 100 years. And some of my loved ones are very ill right now. But what I instead thought was like, I think she's asking if anything really scary has happened just to me in the last 24 hours. So when she asked me, are you stressed? I said, no. And after I got home, I said to Lee, why did I say that? Yes, I'm stressed. Why did she even ask that? So that's to say that right now, I think, speaking only for myself, it's really helpful to just know that it's really stressful out there right now. So I want to talk about what we can do to get enough nourishing food without worrying about making the perfect choices nutritionally, or the perfect choices with organic food, or the perfect choices with what meal would look really impressive to put on Facebook. Just how we can set all that aside because there's a pandemic and just get some good food. So I have an inspirational quote for you. I saw this months ago, and I've carried it in my heart for so long. Pandemic dinner, week 3. Crispy fish tacos with quick pickled onions and homemade chili lime aioli. Pandemic dinner, week 47,573. Buttered noodles and a melatonin gummy. Yeah, this has really helped me. This really spoke to me. So I was talking to my sister yesterday about this presentation, and my sister and brother-in-law have an adorable toddler who has very, very strong opinions about everything because she's a toddler. And often when I talk to my sister, she'll tell me about beautiful meals that she and her husband have made. And they're trying not to go to the grocery store very often. And they're trying to eat as nourishing food as they can. And they have a toddler, so time is really limited. So when they put together a really beautiful meal, and the toddler does not want to eat the beautiful meal, they just sort of have to roll with it because it's a toddler. So here's the beautiful meal that my sister and her husband made. There's vegan chicken that was marinated for 24 hours in this herb spice marinade. There's a potato and vegetable dish. There's lentils cooked with spices and butter. There's garlic naan bread. It's gorgeous. And you might notice the clue that there is a child in the house is the tiny plastic teapot. And then here we can see the child investigating the meal. You can see the chubby little hand. And here you can see what this child chose to eat, which is a piece of the bread with rice on top. Out of this entire beautiful meal. And the thing, like, my sister and her husband are doing, I think, just a spectacular job of parenting during the pandemic, and just in general, they just do a spectacular job of parenting this wonderful child. And they know that one day she'll eat nothing but rice, and the next day she'll plow through an entire field of broccoli, and the next day she'll eat her weight in watermelon, and the next day she'll eat like they let her do what she does, and she keeps growing, and she's fine. And so I thought that this was a really interesting idea to think about, like, having some care and compassion and flexibility for ourselves and not trying to get things too perfect. And there's a picture of beans on this slide because one of this child's recent obsessions was beans for a few weeks, especially raw, like cold chickpeas out of a can for some reason. She was delighted with and was turning down these like beautiful meals my sister was cooking to eat plain cold chickpeas out of a can. So does anybody want to share any meals that have nourished them recently? And I promise does not have to be impressive.
Well, so tonight, actually last night, tonight, tomorrow night, and the night after that, because I make a lot. I made this sheet pan dinner from the New York Times. It's chicken thighs roasted with plums, and I had to throw in some peaches and red onions, and there's some honey on it and a lot of fennel, crushed fennel. And the plums are really tart because they're not particularly sweet. And so it's this very sort of mushy tart fruit with roasted chicken, and it's just delicious. It's from the New York Times from months ago. It's delicious.
And because we're in Florida, I actually think the plums and the peaches and the onions were local. That's a guess, but you know, could be.
Thank you. That sounds amazing.
Oh, Christine.
I ended it's not as fancy, but I got a copycat recipe for the sauce for a bacon turkey bravo from Panera.
Ooh.
And I have that kind of bread too, the tomato basil bread. So I had a homemade bacon turkey bravo with green beans, which are like my favorite vegetable ever. And that nourished me. That was really yummy too.
That sounds amazing.
Well, on the opposite end of the spectrum, yesterday I found a can of tuna and it was great. And instead of mayonnaise, I mixed it with lemon dill hummus, and it was the best tuna salad I have ever had. I want to just add the other end of the spectrum, just decrease the pressure.
Well, I have another perspective. I would say one of my most nourishing meals are Fridays when I order out, so I don't have to make it. And I celebrate getting through the week. And I look forward to those meals. I tend to buy whatever I am going to get like in the mid-morning. Like that's how excited I am about the meals. And it could just be pizza from Pisano's or Chinese food, but it's just something that I don't have to cook, and it's awesome.
That sounds great. Has anybody else had any nourishing meals that they want to talk about?
Well, I guess I rediscovered that because I wasn't at Clarendon pre-pandemic, that it's really easy to walk to Trader Joe's, and I can walk there, get groceries in 30 minutes. And I love basically everything they sell. This is not a Trader Joe's ad, but I'm from California and it just reminds me of home. So it's sort of like, oh, it's a Trader Joe's product. I'm excited to eat it versus like, what on earth am I going to do with another chicken? Chicken breast.
Yeah.
So just that familiarity. And we are big black beans fans. So
I love beans, but you know, I'm Puerto Rican. We love beans. We can eat rice and beans every day and be very happy, you know.
Well,
So who knew that it was a perfect protein, right? You know, but I have 2 children that will not eat beans. They will not. They're Puerto Ricans, I think. I keep saying they're Puerto Ricans. And Emily's whole thing is, well, I'm only half Puerto Rican, you know. And I'm like, give me a break. You know, I'm please. Anyway, but now my oldest child has been making rice and beans all the time, and in all these combinations that we make rice and beans with. And my grandchildren love beans, so I'm vindicated, you know, that they, I actually stopped cooking because Puerto Ricans tend, I think it's I don't know what it is, but we tend to cook for an army when we cook. And I'm trying to learn how to cook for one person. And sometimes I forget that there is not a child in my house. So I keep thinking, you know, I forget. And then I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with all this food? You know, so that can be a problem. So, and also I've learned that I can't eat. You know, like I used to be able to say, okay, I'm going to eat this plate of food. But I now wind up having to eat the last like half.
mm-hmm.
But I will tell you, I made Puerto Rican beef stew last week. It was delicious. It was pretty good. You know, then I didn't know what to do with the rest of it. I used my pressure cooker, which I've had since 1972. It's moved everywhere with me. And I had not eaten beef in like forever because I really don't buy beef and I don't really eat beef. But I just was in the supermarket because I got my shot, my first vaccine, dose of the vaccine. I was in Safeway and I was like, oh, I was walking around and I'm like, oh, beef stew. Oh yeah, Puerto Rican beef stew. I can do that. So.
Sometimes it's nice to fall back on a comforting traditional recipe.
Yeah. I think it was that because I was getting tired from having gotten the dose. You know, like when you get a vaccine, you get kind of tired and stuff. My arm was a little weird. And I just like, oh, comfort food. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, you know, but I think my brain was telling me that. So
Anna has suggestions for recipes, actually. So it's a perfect segue.
Anna, I love that.
Thank you. So these are you know, I think the internet is like 90% recipe websites. So I'm sure you have favorite recipe websites. But these are some that I've been really liking recently. There's one, so the one at the top called Budget Bites is all the recipes are broken down by how much they cost. And looking through it, I really liked looking through it because there were a lot of ideas of like how to make really different meals from the same ingredients. So like looking through a list of like meals that can be made in big batches and frozen or something, like it was like, oh, I can very easily see how I can make this grocery list. It was much easier than some websites where it's like a bunch of expensive or strange ingredients that I'm not going to use all of. Food Gawker is a website that pulls recipes from a million different like little recipe blogs across the internet. So it's like you're searching a bunch of small recipe blogs all at once, and it's really good if you have dietary restrictions because it lets you exclude as many ingredients as you want. So if you're like, I'm allergic to nuts and I'm allergic to eggs and I'm allergic, like you can add in as many as you want and it'll still have a bunch of recipes for you. And that last link is for—
What is it called? It's called Budget Bites?
Budget Bites is the top one, but Bites is spelled with a Y. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And the last link is for a cookbook called Good and Cheap. And actually at that link, you can download the cookbook for free. Yeah, it's great. So food and connection. As the pandemic has been going on, especially earlier in the pandemic, as Lee and I were doing all of the cooking for ourselves, I was finding myself craving certain foods. And then when we would get all the ingredients and make the foods, it like wasn't satisfying. And I realized that I wasn't necessarily craving the food specifically. I was wanting to share certain meals with loved ones that I wasn't getting to see. So I thought that part of the importance of keeping ourselves nourished right now is trying to fulfill the social element that we often have with meals. And so I thought we could sort of talk about ways that we can do that right now. And here's another pyramid. Because I stumbled across that pyramid about food needs, I thought, well, I'll look up the other, the classic list of human needs. And it puts relationships just above physical safety in terms of how vital they are for our survival. So that makes sense why I'm a little stressed right now, I think, and why we're all a little stressed right now. I think everybody's missing somebody right now. Yeah. So breaking news, there's still a pandemic. And so I tried to come up with some ways that I've been connecting with loved ones during the pandemic, or ways that we can connect with other people during the pandemic, like with food. So some of the ways that I've done have been sharing successful new recipes with my loved ones. I've also shared some really unsuccessful recipes, really angrily, like as though the recipe lied to me. But I might have.
It did.
Thank you.
I've been there, I know.
Yeah. And then also revisiting really old family recipes. I've really enjoyed having a loved one on the phone while I'm eating a meal or while I'm cooking. Like having my sister on the phone while we're both cooking has been really, really great. Even though we're both making so much noise, it's hard to hear each other. It's really felt a lot like having her there. I've also been frantically texting my friends for cooking advice sometimes when things are starting to go off the rails, which again feels like they're there and helping me fix it. Lee and I have tried to find ways to share food with loved ones. So
Hannah has tried to find ways.
Well, no, you accepted food when
I eat the food.
Yeah, my sister she made spiced nuts and shipped them in time for Christmas to everyone in our extended family. And it was like this little tiny
Sliced. Yeah.
like a little tiny Ziploc bag of spiced nuts, but it tasted like home cooking and it really meant the world to me. And my my brother and his fiance. 1 week they brought Lee and I a bunch of food, and a few weeks after that, Lee and I took them a bunch of food, and I cried when I cried when I ate the cooking. It was so amazing to eat food from someone else's kitchen.
We also received several bags of scones from the Scone Ministry.
The Scone Ministry.
I was just going to say, you gave us a plum cake.
Upside down plum cake.
Which was delicious.
That was amazing.
It was so good.
Our first and ever, surely the best we'll ever have.
So that was that was a great share.
That was a wonderful share back. And we never expected anyone to give us food back after the scones, but that was lovely.
I'm glad you liked it. And then I thought that it might sort of, like, when we, at times when we've taken things to the little free food pantries that are around Arlington, or times when we brought things to what's the word? A food pantry drop-off box, or when we brought things to the supply drive, that really, it felt really similar to me to when we were able to take food to people that we do know. It felt like we were sharing food with neighbors that we just don't know yet. And I thought that that's sort of like, it feels like it is with this idea. So I've been talking a long time. Has anybody had any ways that they've connected with people over food during the pandemic that they want to talk about?
I started having Zoom lunches with Sydney from Hogar, Lee, on Tuesdays, and we're going to continue doing that. And so that's been really nice because we sit down and you know, two women from the Caribbean talking about food is always really exciting. But we talk about other stuff too. But that's been helpful. That's been, you know, because I can't obviously cook for my kids or anybody else.
Oh, go ahead.
You know, we love to travel and have so missed that. And so people are being really creative. And there was a woman in the hills above Assisi in Italy who we went there several years ago and did a cooking class in her kitchen. And she's been doing virtual live cooking classes from her kitchen on Zoom. And we've done a couple of them. I don't cook live. I watch the class and take notes, and some people cook live. And then I'll make it later. But it's just like being in her kitchen, and it's such a great connection. And there are other people on the call, some of whom are cooking live with her, and you can see them cooking with their families and stuff. And that has really helped us stay connected to, the idea of travel. So that's been fun.
My mom, my sister, and I all made a family recipe of chocolate chip cookies together on Zoom at the same time. And it was really lovely. And I scarfed those up. They just felt like home.
That's cool.
I have a friend who calls me when he starts making dinner for himself, maybe 2-3 times a week. And so he will be cooking and we'll talk. And then he's like, okay, my food's done. I'll talk to you later. And he'll hang up. So that's been a nice kind of organic, unexpected thing. And now it's just a joke. I don't think it'll ever end.
Has anybody else had any ways that they've sort of shared food with loved ones that they want to talk about?
I subscribed my father to something called Piquant Post, which is where you get someone a gift subscription of packets of spices from around the world with recipe cards every month. And it's sort of like giving someone homework that they may or may not want to do. So that is also an option if you want someone to surprise with different global spices on a regular basis.
An important part of this process, if you order this gift for someone you love, is every time you talk to them on the phone, you have to say, have you cooked the recipe yet? Have you made the recipe yet? Have you made the recipe yet?
Because they're not like the most easy recipes. They're like a little complicated, I think.
So that way the person gets delicious spices and delicious food and harassment all together.
It's really a perfect recipe.
You could say that I was surprised.
Why? Wait, say it again?
You could say that I was surprised.
Oh, good. Mission accomplished.
Well, the whole scone making thing was, selfishly for me. I mean, I just felt like I needed to have something to do and feel like I was staying connected with people. And even if it's standing on somebody's doorstep in the freezing cold and watching them reach down on the doorstep and pick up a bag, that was really great. And it really, particularly in the early 13 weeks of the pandemic, it really sort of, uplifted my spirits a lot. And, I'm continuing to do that off and on.
Yeah, it was nice to actually see people, socially distanced, but to see people and to let them know we cared. It was very nice. I know many of you.
It meant a lot to me. I want to say that to you too. It meant a lot for me to see the two of you, Ron and I. Ron has been the best bud ever. He was the first person I met at Clarendon and greeted me so warmly and so lovingly. And I will never forget that. And yes, Ron, you have a very special place in my heart. And so to see the two of you coming to bring me scones was pretty amazing. And I want to thank you for that because it meant a lot for me. A lot.
I liked it because it felt like it was something we were all doing together. Like once the public health emergency began, we were all very isolated and having our own individual experiences, but it was kind of neat having the scones and knowing that so many other people had the same thing. And it was sort of like you were sharing, like separately.
A very shared experience. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Ron and James. Thank you for that.
Do you have other discussion questions?
Let's see. We can talk more about this. I'm sure people always have more things to say about food. But another discussion question I had was, has anyone found a place that they'd recommend for anyone who's looking for new recipes to try?
And this should probably be our last discussion question, I think, just for time.
Yeah.
With the pressure cooker that I have, there's a strange echo for a moment there. I have one of the electric pressure cookers, an Instant Pot, and there's a gentleman, Jeffrey Eisner, and he has a website, pressureluckcooking.com. So pressure like pressure cooker. pressureluckcooking.com. And that's, pressureluckcooking.com. And he's really delightful. And every once in a while he'll let people know, well, I like it and my husband doesn't, but I like it, or he'll say, and we both liked it. So it's a big hit, and he's written a couple of cookbooks. One is even that just came out is about eating light. So that's one of the ones I go to a lot.
It's not recipes, but we've started going to the farmer's market a lot more than we used to, including the winter's market. And it's just eating what's in season and then, seeing said item and then Googling a recipe around it, which has been a way to do more creative cooking, but also to be connected with local agriculture. kind of a fun trip that is outside. You know, it's mask wearing outside people. So it feels like a fun activity too. So what can I do with this purple potato?
As James mentioned, the New York Times has really good recipes, particularly not necessarily the food section on Wednesdays, but on Sundays, they have an at-home section that talks about like much easier, simpler recipes.
If you're trapped in the house with a bunch of kids and just something you can do.
Or even just on your own.
Yeah.
It's very easy, relatively easy and good.
Yeah.
Many of them.
Yeah, that's
and a lot of vegetarian.
That's where the plum thing came from.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
I follow James on social media, and then I just try to make whatever he made a couple weeks later.
If you like Indian food, there's a lot, again, with the pressure cooker, there's a website, twoslevers.com. And the woman got most of her recipes from her grandmother. And then she has devised some of her recipes and and she is Indian. So, I mean, it's bona fide, so to say. And it's I can't put the green chilies in it, but butter chicken is just the best recipe she's got, I think.
Thank you. That sounds so good.
I learned to cook without recipes, so I'm very hesitant to try recipes. I cook how my mother taught me to cook and my grandmother taught me to cook. And then when I talk to other Latinx people, we can talk about that because we don't really measure. It's kind of hard to tell someone, this is how you make this, because you just make it. And that's how my mother taught me and my grandmother. So following recipes has been an issue for me.
Dang it, I was gonna ask for your beans and rice recipe.
You're in trouble. You're in trouble. You can watch me make it and you'll learn. I've done that, but yeah, it'll be okay. All right, I actually have written some out. Oh, I know. I gave Brooklyn asked me about making a dish that we got arroz con gandules, and so I walked her through that.
Cool.
Anyway, I'm gonna head out because I have someone at my door. I don't know who it is.
Thank you for joining us, Tony.
This was really good. This was really good. I always love to talk about food.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Do you have final thoughts?
Just thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for sharing.
And we can go.
Thank you.
Maybe we can go off of YouTube